with Restream. They've been messing up the title of the guest and everything.
I like Restream. It's a good service.
Can you hear me well, Jay?
I can.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. This is going to be so fun. I think I'm going to get started in just a sec. Good afternoon, beautiful people. This is Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum. I have the honor to be in the presence of Jae Carico. Is how you pronounce your last name, Carico?
You got that exactly right.
That's awesome. Okay. A self-described anti-fascist and anarchist, former pro wrestler, writer, musician, amongst a lot of other things that we're going to learn about Jay today. Carico's band Sound Bandits released a brand new album last month entitled Noise Crimes. Carico has agreed to do an 1.5-hour interview, which is very generous of you to do that. I appreciate it. And Jay is also a co-founder of Guillotine Press, and they ran for U.S. Senate in 2018 in the state of Tennessee. I'm assuming that's where you're located right now.
It is.
Okay, me too. I'm just in a different part now. I was closer to you in Knoxville, but now we're in the Nashville area.
Okay, about 2 hours away.
Where are you based right now, Jay?
Cleveland, near Chattanooga.
Cleveland. Okay, so do you want to kind of tell the audience a little bit about sort of your background? You say you're from Cleveland, Tennessee. So how do we get from Cleveland, Tennessee to sort of like-minded people like us talking right now? How do we get to that journey?
So I was born to Stella and John Edward Sisk, and they had some issues with addiction when they first had me and stuff, and they didn't really feel like they were able to be the kind of parents they wanted to be. And my aunt adopted me. I was homeless at the time, and they felt like that wasn't a good situation for me, and so they dropped me off at my grandma's. And I was adopted by a middle class family. My dad was a chemical engineer, very conservative. We went to church every Sunday, Wednesday, Thursday for youth study, and I grew up in that. Maybe I took it too seriously and became a communist.
Cheers, man.
But basically, the real journey is I went to the DNC club, I went to the RNC club in my school, and the RNC club seemed like a pep rally that was all white, and the Democratic club seemed like a strategy meeting that was diverse, and so I started kind of moving a little bit more liberal, and then Obama came along. I'd studied anarchism a little bit, studied some stuff, but I hadn't really got to me yet. Obama came along and he made me cry with his speeches, said some beautiful things, and I really believed in what he was talking about. And
he did it to all of us at one point.
and then he got elected, and I saw him do the same things, and I realized that that he's not really the one who's running stuff, And if he was, I'm not sure that he has the same beliefs as the majority of the working class people. So then I guess Ron Paul was, and I was in the Navy for a little while. I'd gone to seminary. I had gotten out of that, gone to the Church of Christ version of seminary, but preaching college. And then I'd gotten away from that. I had gone to the military. I found out they were building oil pipelines before they built water pipelines. And during holiday routine, I've been studying Islam. And so I was just like, no, I don't think I'm gonna do that. Refused deployment, engaged in a pattern of misconduct to get removed from the military. Soon after that, I found out about Ron Paul and the anti-war stuff that he was talking about. And I was like into that. But then I found Noam Chomsky and kind of was against those economic policies that Ron Paul was pushing. And that's where I became a libertarian socialist. And I was for about 15 years. More recently, I've delved more into Marxism-Leninism and more into communism a little bit, because I feel like I had turned a blind eye to these things just because they were called authoritarianism, albeit now I've kind of been looking back on those things with a more of a benefit of the doubt situation, because I feel like those folks were a lot more like us than I had been led to believe, and they wanted the same things we did, and I was wanting to see what happened, what went wrong, what we've not been told, And so that's where I'm at now, and I've been involved in activism for 15 years. I've run nonprofits and done a lot of different labor and anti-hate organizing and stuff.
Well, that's awesome. I'll tell you, some of the stuff you just said, Jay, I want to sort of elaborate on, because since I'm an educator, that's that part of me coming out. my audience is probably a lot less familiar with a lot of the terminologies you just used. You used about three there that I kind of want you to expand on to sort of differentiate what those philosophies are. Before we even talk about anarchism, I want to talk about what is Marxism-Leninism. What is I don't know if you identify with Stalinism at all, but can you kind of break down the two or three branches that you just mentioned as far as ideologically speaking, so we can kind of get that cleared?
Sure. I think that so I am a baby communist, if you want to call it that. I am new to this. I'm not as young. I'm not like, I've been studying anarchism for 15 years, so I could give you a million rundowns on those. But because I'm newer to Marxism, I hope that I can do it justice. But essentially, the idea is that the workers produce everything, and they have very little leverage in the way that things are run, what they're building, why they're building it, who they get to choose to represent them, et cetera, et cetera. And Marx's idea is that if the workers were in control of the government, if they were able to take over the government, that eventually could lead to a place where there was no need for coercive government, that the workers would take over eventually. And the Marxist-Leninism is the practice that brought about a revolution in Russia, and it's the writings thereof that kind of are about the theory of how to practice that, how to bring that into reality. And of course, we live in a different situation on a lot of different levels than 1917 Russia. So I think that folks want to look at and say, okay, what were the problems here? What were the things that, along with 14 different invasions within their first, 10 years of being in a power, what were the other aspects that were difficult, or what were the things that they did wrong? What were the things they did right? And how can we compare those material realities to the material realities of today? A lot of what Marx talked about was based on Hegel's dialectics, and about seeing something as a contradiction, seeing the different things that come together, and how to kind of like either synthesize or change the situation in which there's a power dynamic that's unjust, essentially.
Okay, so going back to your point about Marxism, I appreciate that breakdown too, just for some audience members that may be less familiar with some of these ideologies. Is that a proposition that's a gradual dissolution of the government under Marxism, or is that something that's spontaneous? How does that work?
So in my understanding and in my reading, this would not be something that was spontaneous, because spontaneous revolution, or spontaneous action in general, spontaneous activism, can do something to inspire people. It can lead to people saying, "Oh, that's a really important thing to do." It can lead to helping people in an immediate situation. It can lead to a lot of good things for the moment. But I guess as a Marxist, or as I guess what a Marxist would say would be that as long as the global financiers of capital, like the people who are in charge of the majority of the resources, then the amount we're able to do is going to be very, very little unless we are organized as much as they are as a working class.
Okay. I like the way you brought that into the fold, because I was going to talk about this article that's how I found out about you, Jay, was through this article by a publication called The Outline from 2018, when you ran for the Senate of Tennessee against Phil Bredesen and Marsha Blackburn and 5 other independents, I think, in the field. And I don't know if you followed my previous podcast, but to me, I mean, Dem Republicans that's what they are. I mean, it's a one-party state as far as I'm concerned. I don't waste my fucking time trying to differentiate between a D and a R when it's, the same objective. But how did that go for you? Because I'm assuming you tried to introduce some sort of an anarchist platform into that Senate race. Like, how did that work? Just your experience campaigning and everything.
So I definitely am along the lines of the Black Panthers when they say that if it's not accessible to the poor, it's not revolutionary. So in so doing, I decided I probably made $100 in campaign donations because I did not ask, because I was like, I want to see how far we can go with just memes and videos and podcasts and what anybody without any sort of money would not have access to, just to see how far we get. We got 3.5 thousand votes. I did have a platform. What happened was actually to lead up to all this was I had been doing anti-hate work for this group called TARN, Tennessee Anti-Racist Network. And I've been organizing a group against AMRIN, which was this American Renaissance, which is tied closely to the Christian Conservative Coalition, which used to be called the White Citizens Council. And Bill Richardson, who was I believe, I'm not sure if he's the vice president, but he was no, he wasn't the vice president. George H.W. Bush was. So he was an advisor or on the cabinet of some sort in Ronald Reagan's administration.
The Bill Richardson from New Mexico?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
And he was part of the White Conservative Council or White Citizens Council. Anyway, so this is and so I've been going and doing demonstrations against AMRIN, which is in my backyard, basically here, like close to you, actually, in Dixon, Tennessee, near Nashville. Mm-hmm. And I had been doing, the first year I went, I spoke at a conference with Opal Tometi and Alicia Garza, who were the founders of Black Lives Matter, and Jeannie Alexander, who's an amazing prison activist, and Beth Foster, who helped me learn a lot of this stuff through Justice School and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I had been to that for about 4 years, and I had been the main organizer. Sorry, my dog's.
No, you're fine. No, it's all good.
And so we so essentially, I had been doing that for a few years, and then Donald Trump got elected, and that year a lot of people showed up to the demonstration. Mm-hmm. Because the alt-right had been, he was their guy, and a lot of people showed up that year. I got attacked, but right before that, Daryl Lamont Jenkins had asked if I could do media on behalf of Antifa because him and Lacey, who were mostly doing it, were just inundated with media calls and stuff. And so that was about that I've been doxing fascists and stuff, and doing a lot of work, in the previous few years. And I had been getting threats and been getting doxed myself. Mm. And that year I got attacked by a Nazi. I was able to defend myself. That made some news.
Is that the photo? Did they use the outline, or somebody did, like the Charlottesville rally? Is that what that was?
That was 2 weeks before Charlottesville.
Oh, so you got beat up before that.
Well, I was attacked, but I actually defended myself. I was fine. He ended up on life flight, being helicoptered off because I was in the military. I've done MMA and wrestling and stuff, so I knew what I was doing. And he did not realize that. I don't think when he attacked me. And then when Charlottesville happened about 2 weeks later, I was jumped that day, and that's when I was attacked by like 6 of them.
I saw that you got kicked in the head and stuff. I saw the pictures.
Yeah, I got hit with I got hit with a mag light. Luckily, I had body armor on. I was pretty much fine. But I wasn't fighting back that day because I was on bond from the previous situation. I did not want to go to jail in Dixon, Tennessee, where they have Confederate monuments outside their courthouse. And so I was like, I got a headlock, and like this kid, he had to be like, I don't know, he may have been 18, but he was young, and he had me in a headlock, and I just like looked at him. He was trying to push me down, and I was just like looking at him because I was like, bud, you're not going to do anything. And he punched me, and I just stood there kind of just like shrugged my shoulders. You can see this in the like I like shrugged my shoulders in the video, like because he's just a little kid, and but that happened, and then through that situation, when all that stuff happened, I got a lot of folks, who were either endorsing candidates and running candidates and stuff like that, who asked me to run. And so, yeah, I was like, well, this will be an opportunity to move the Overton window a little bit. And I wasn't an anarchist at the time, but I wanted to be able to get those ideas out there and one of my platform, for instance, was pay ratios. So like right now, some corporate CEOs make 2,500 times the lowest paid employee. And I felt like if we could incentivize, lobby, whatever, we have to do in the current situation to gets to a place of like 100 to 1 or 10 to 1 or whatever, where when the profits go up, everybody gets a raise.
So that's your 1 to 10 ratio proposal that you had.
Yeah,
I heard you talking about that in a couple of interviews, the 1 to 10 ratio. So that's basically you make a tenth of what the CEO makes. Is that what that is?
Well, that would be I would push for 1 to 10, but 1 to 100, 1 to anything.
Right, anything compared to what it is. What is it now?
It could be anything. It doesn't. There's no
1 to 300,000. I mean, anything, right?
It could be. Yeah, it could be. It's a very arbitrary assessment based on what the CEO and the board want to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that I know in those same interviews, you seem to have a conflict, kind of like I do. I have a conflict about minimum wage. What are your views on minimum wage? Because I just with inflation and besides inflation, it's just at some point, geographically it's not universal because living in one place is not the same as living in Tennessee. So how do you view minimum wage? Do you think raising it is sufficient, or do you just have a completely different philosophy altogether?
I think that anything we can do, what I mean, is good. If we can raise it, that's great. I think that not necessarily de facto, but de jure, the CEOs will probably raise prices because they aren't gonna, they aren't gonna. That's how they're gonna adjust it. Is to kind of almost punish the consumer for the worker doing better in a certain way. I think that a living wage would be better that was like tied to actual economic conditions, actual, that would be great. That would be the best thing, would be to tie it to actual economic conditions. Well, the best thing would be worker ownership, but it's sort of that, I think that, tying it to the actual conditions, tying it to the profits, tying it to, if that, I think any of these things would be better than just a minimum wage hike, because again, like, people pay the minimum wage because it's the minimum wage. It's like the lowest they can go, so they'll do that in a lot of situations.
I wanted to talk to you specifically, and I invited you on because I think there's so many misconceptions about what anarchy is, what are different anarchisms, and I have some leanings within anarchy. I don't quite understand it 100%, but I've always been one of those type of people politically. I don't want to really understand. I'm not into theory, deep into theory, because my lived experience is enough to show me that I know that this is not the right way to do things. Like I don't like the system at all. And so I know I'm definitely part of the left, but and I think I'm pretty far to the left, but I don't try to identify too much because I just kind of let my actions speak for that. And I like to hear you talking about these different things because I think people have this perception that anarchists just want to overthrow shit, but they don't have like views about economy and about how the systems should work. And so that's why I'm enjoying this, because I'm actually getting like, no, this person has views about this same bullshit electoral system that you guys like to cheerlead and follow all the time. No, you can be against the system but still want to change the system and have those views yourself. So what do you mean by anarchy? What does that mean to you? And what are the different sort of adversities that you deal with within the anarchist communities?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So I think that so anarchism as an ideology is the idea that unjust hierarchy, unjust authority should be abolished, and we should critique authority, and the burden of proof is on anyone with authority to prove that they're legitimate. So I still hold to a lot of that. And to answer your question, I think that there's different variations thereof. There is anarcho-syndicalism, which is where trade unions essentially would be the committees that would kind of on a national level arbitrate things, but then on a local level, the individual workplaces would be the way that things would be run. In terms of what issues I've had in doing that, is just running for office as an open anarchist. There was anarchists who were against that, who said no anarchist is doing that, and I agree. And I mean, to a certain extent, it's probably true. I think that anarchism in Rojava, in Chiapas, and like you just said, Chiapas, they don't actually call themselves anarchists. They just learn by doing, and they just,
Absolutely.
And so, but you could call that, but the Catalonia, there's parts of India, and I think all of these things, I support these projects. I think that they're great projects. I think that the issue, I guess, that I would have today with anarchism is that if there is no organizational structure that is moving those communes, essentially those autonomous zones, if they ever try to go up against empire, they'd be crushed immediately. And they need some, and so the question is, how do you make those already existing things organized enough to where it would be able to stand up against empire if that ever happened, and that's where I guess I got more into Marxism-Leninism, because it seems like that is it's like the program for how to do that, how to turn from it, to go from having organized a autonomous space to making that a national policy, where workers are running the things, as opposed to just an individual area that may be able to achieve such, situation.
There are lots of self-described anarchists that run for office, and I kind of had an issue with the outline article, and I do have an issue with other people they tend to be, they almost seem like they're purists when it comes to like they have the right to tell other anarchists or anyone else, how it's supposed to be done, those type of people. And I feel like that kind of the whole idea of an anarchist run for office isn't that uncommon, I guess is what I'm trying to say. At least people that I've followed over the years, I know that they run for office who identify as anarchists. So I think that that's a misconception in itself. But like you said, I mean, I don't think it's something that's necessarily fixed. I don't think it's as fixed as people who are against it make it seem. I just think it's simply it becomes incorporated with other leftist philosophies over time. I did have a question about that. Is it possible to be right and anarchist and be a part of the right? Is that even possible? Because I've heard libertarians and other people say that they have anarchist leanings. What do you think about that?
So I think that okay, let's say you had anarcho-capitalism, let's say, right? And you create a situation in which there's no government, there's no organized the government is a gun, and if there's nobody holding that, then the people who have the control of resources, let's say you're a business owner and you have capital in that situation, and let's say somebody and you hire a bunch of workers, you hire a security firm to protect your assets. Well, if those workers, there's going to be more of them than you, and there's going to be more of the security firm than you. So if those workers can convince that security firm that their interests are more aligned than your interests, well, you're not going to be in control very long, because who's going to stop them from taking over? And I think that anarcho-capitalism is a ideology held by people. Murray Rothbard was a libertarian, who was I guess a colleague of Ayn Rand. And he came up with the term libertarian, which had been used as a way of describing an anarchist or libertarian socialists, prior to that. And he kind of took that word. So do I think that it's possible to identify as a right-wing person and be an anarchist? I mean, technically, yes. In practice, I don't see how that's going to work. I don't know how to understand how the capitalists of that day, first of all, will not be an authority, first of all, and secondly, how they'll keep that authority without the use of a state.
That's a good point. It really is. Yeah, that is a very good point. I asked that question because so where you're at right now, do you believe that electoral politics can work? Do you have any sort of hope in electoral politics, or do you think it has to be pretty much all direct action at this point?
So I think that it depends on where you are geographically.
Okay.
And it depends on if you're talking about local, state, national government. Like if you're in California right now, you have the option on your ballot to vote for the PFP or the Democrats in some places. And you don't even have the option to vote for Republicans anymore because they didn't make the ballot.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of cool, like that's optimistic. I think that our current electoral system as is, however, on a national level, especially, and on a statewide level to a large extent, is so controlled by the moneyed interests. Like I said, government's a gun, and the rich have the monopoly on it. They have the monopoly on the state. They own it. They run it. And so anything that, and like you said earlier, the Republicans and Democrats are very similar. I think the Democrats are basically controlled opposition. They take what the left and what people, human beings, are struggling with, and they provide a solution that benefits the rich, and they sell it to the working class. And when that doesn't work, the Republicans say, oh, look, that didn't work, or they say that wasn't an issue to begin with, or whatever they say. And because the Democrats are ineffective at actually meeting the needs of the people, then it doesn't, then they can say, look, these leftist ideas are useless, and so they play off each other, I feel like. And
I don't feel, I know you say you feel like that. I know that they play. I know that they sleep together. Like I know that from
and so that's what it's like. If the government was run for the workers, if the workers had leverage within the government even, then let's say it like this: in situations when workers do control the government, the material conditions are better.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if right now, and I wouldn't say the direct action is the direct action is super important. I think that we do need to organize to have electoral presence for sure, especially on local level. And if we had that on a local level, we could build up. But we need a party. We need to have some sort of party that has union connectivity, that has international ties, that has these things, that is run by workers for workers. There was the Farmer Labor's Party. There's a lot of parties that do a lot of powerful things. I do think that we do need to insert ourselves into that situation, because if only for the reason of that's where people look, that's where people's eyes are. And if you can, even if you're just putting up a sign that says look over here instead, you know what I mean, like at least people see it. So I think that we have to use all of the levers that we can possibly use to change the situation. I don't think that it alone will do it. It's like one of my campaign slogans was "Don't just vote."
And how much during your 2018 Senate run? How many votes did you get?
3.5 thousand.
Really? 3,500?
Yes.
And what were your expectations going into the race? Did you think you were going to get any at all?
I didn't. I just wanted to. Yeah, I didn't really have a certain number expectation. I was happily surprised at the amount of votes we got, given that we didn't spend any money.
No money at all.
Yeah, and
I'm assuming no visibility on television. Obviously not.
Well, I was on CNN.
You were,
and a Netflix documentary, and Time and Newsweek and Rolling Stone. So there was some.
Oh wow.
Stuff, but that was because of Daryl, asking me to do media for Antifa, and then him sending me media that he was.
I got you.
And Daryl's the guy who pioneered doxing. For people who don't know, he runs One People's Project. He's his dad was part of the milkshake protests back in the day. He's a really cool dude.
Okay. We're sort of going all over the place, but that's the way chaos to me works out really well. I was going to get to that later. You mentioned Antifa. That's also a name that came in the news, obviously doing more towards Trump, because I've been following politics for over 20 years, and I had never heard Antifa referred to that often in mainstream media or any media for that matter. What exactly is Antifa?
So anti-fascism is a set of tactics and ideology to a certain extent, more set of tactics, honestly, because You could be Marxist-Leninist, you could be anarchist, you could be a Democrat, you could be a Republican, you could be a libertarian,
Really?
and be anti-fascist. In the sense that if you're standing up against fascists, you know what I'm saying? So I would say, it's stopping them from organizing ethnic cleansings. That's the main thing. It's through intimidation, through making sure they don't get a chance to speak, through whatever it might be, to stop their rallies from being able to go on, but doxing them, making them lose their jobs, making folks not want to be fascist anymore. And it started in the 1930s in Italy, and then was all throughout. Whenever there's fascists, there are anti-fascists, and it's more of a tactical reaction. It's not necessarily it can be an ideology of its own to a certain extent, but I feel like it's so diverse that it's not necessarily. It's like Occupy, you know what I mean? It's like Occupy had all sorts of people in it, but anybody who's against white supremacists, ethno states, those kinds of things, white nationalism, if you're engaging with that situation, and trying to stop them from getting their ideology into the mainstream, then you're part of that.
I'll push back some on what you're saying, not in a way that's argumentative, but simply we have some disagreement about this. My whole thing is that I feel like we've been getting more fascist over time, and that the one-party system is a fascist party. So I don't know how Democrats and Republicans especially could be anti-fascists when, to me, they are the fascists.
Well, you're right.
They're the fascists with suits and ties.
Oh, you're right.
Versus the fringe fascists who are in the streets fighting against Antifas. I mean, that's the way I see that.
No, I agree with you 100%. And I guess I would make the distinction. I would make the caveat that I might make is when I said that Republicans and Democrats could be anti-fascist technically, what I mean is somebody who votes for Republicans or votes for Democrats could also be out on the street.
Oh, I got you.
Saying, hell no, we're not going to let you talk your white supremacist bullshit,
Right. Have you ever had, because I know you've had a very interesting upbringing, and you talked to that, you spoke to that some. Do you have conflicts in your mind sometimes about that approach? I guess going more towards obviously a big threat, but a smaller group of people, when you compare that to the actual electoral system that has its own sort of backdoor schemes and everything else. Do you sort of have conflicts with what you're doing is not enough, or you want to attack certain parts of it?
Certainly, I think that the anti-imperialism movement is certainly a powerful and important thing to consider when we are talking about anti-fascism, because the prison systems are fascist, the border patrol systems are fascist. We have to look at that. Yeah, for sure, 100%. I think that these folks, it's not so much about numbers. It's more about power.
Power.
Yeah, like Stephen Miller was the Trump. These folks, Steve Bannon, these folks have power, and they are, or Alexander Dugin, if you're talking about Russia, for instance. He helped bring down the Soviet Union, and he's helped build the alt-right ideology in the United States. I think that we can. I think that there's way bigger enemies. I think that it's just a matter of these folks will attack innocent people, and they will let people who aren't so innocent, who are interested in this kind of ideology, they'll give them shows of power. And we have to humiliate them because their tactics don't work to build their movement. You know what I mean? We don't want it to build. We don't want it to grow. We want it to stay small. We want it to stay fringe.
Right. So, okay.
But I think also at the exact same time, it's super important to realize that our whole system is very much, in some ways, if a corporate, it's a corporate republic run by corporations. It's got democratic aspects, but it's not obviously in Italy, under fascism, they did not have democracy. You know what I mean? So there's a difference, I think, somewhat, but it's pretty close, pretty close. And imperialism is a slightly different beast, but it's colonialism is an aspect of fascism for sure.
Yeah, I think this is what makes it so tough, because when you're doing your stuff on the ground, it's not publicized at all. But I mean, why would the corporate media publicize something like that and pretend to have the interest of the anti-fascists, but they're really just upholding the same bullshit system? You know, they're not actually trying to solve anything. They're actually promoting it more than anything, and then they invisibilize the actual activists. And if they do visibilize them, they villainize them.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to go through so many different loopholes just from that angle. And so I value your work on the streets, and I commend you, Jae, and all the other people that you've worked with over the years and continue to work with. I think I operate more so from the systemic approach, and the suit and tie people affect way more people than, but that doesn't mean that those elements couldn't strengthen, you know, in collaboration with the system that's already in place. So it's a tough situation. That's why it's hard to strategize, because it's just constantly a moving target all the time.
Yeah, and I think that you know, any individual, like you said earlier about talking about spontaneous action, mutual aid, for instance, let's say mutual aid is great. You go and feed some people, you know what I mean? But like, if you don't build programs out of that, if you don't get demographic surveys of what else they need, of how to make it to where they can be out of that situation and stuff like that, then it's just spontaneous. And in the same way, if we don't use the things we learn to write and to express and to show what worked and what didn't, all these, if we don't do that, then it's nothing, you know what I mean? It's just a inspiration. It's just a day where we stopped something bad from happening, maybe, or where we were able to feel good about standing up against, you know, hate, or maybe we were able to change some minds, you know, through conversation, you know, something like that. But it's not necessarily, you know, everything has to be. And the reason that I feel like the anti-fascism was a place that a space that I wanted to be in, was because if we do need to have, you know, if there comes a time when we have the organizational capacity to stand up against this thing, we're going to need people are going to need to be able to, you know, be effective in that on a number of levels. And I felt like one of those levels was security. And so I felt like that would be a good place to meet people and to, you know, gain, you know, some level of credibility amongst folks, so that when that next phase happens, you know, that we have these kind of like capacities that otherwise would not have existed because we didn't experience them. So for instance, just to give like a historical example, when the Chinese nationalists and the communists were in a civil war against each other, the Japanese invaded in World War II, and they temporarily started firing their guns in the same direction. But right before that, there was the Long March, which was 366 days, where a group of Chinese communists had to move from one area that had been taken over by nationalists into another area. During this time, they were bombed every day. They were in skirmishes every day. But through that, Mao Zedong was the one who led that. He was the regional commander, essentially, if you want to say it like that. And afterwards, whenever people started going, oh, wait a minute, these nationalists and these fascists have very similar ideologies, and they and then not the left wing, but the right wing nationalists, and so like they said, okay, and also these guys are really good at guerrilla warfare because they've practiced guerrilla warfare, you know, and they practiced security, they practiced militancy. And so they were able to fight off the Japanese. And so they were so people started following them, giving the popular support, not just because they were ideologically in agreement, although I think that a lot of times for the majority of people, the communist ideology did meet their material needs, but it was also because these guys were able to defend against the invasion, you know? And so I felt like that was a good place to go on a longer look, like a longer forward view of the situation, was a place where it was good for networking, to be able to meet people who were really serious about this, you know. And any anti-fascist I've ever met doesn't just go to anti-fascist demonstrations. They do all the other stuff too, you know. They do the mutual aid, they do the organizing, and that's why I say, you know, there's people who and I do, earlier I said Republicans could technically be, someone who voted Republican could technically also be anti-fascist. And I have seen that. I've seen that, people out in the demonstrations who said that they voted Republicans, probably not here recently. They didn't vote for Trump, I'm sure. But like, if but maybe a time before that, they might have considered themselves that or whatever. They may be, a Mitch Romney kind of person, and stuff like that. Not to say, again, not to say that any of these beliefs are not fascist in and of themselves per se, but that there's enough of a dismissal of that, like I guess what the word, there's enough of a distance that somebody could hold both thoughts at the same time. Like, I don't like white supremacy, I don't like this or that, but I also want a free market, you know what I mean, or something like that,
Right. Okay, I got you. I have so many different ideas going on. I want to sort of bring back your personal background into the fold some and talk about, you have this group, right? And it's called Sound Bandits.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And do you incorporate any of your political philosophies in your music?
Certainly. Yeah. On a couple levels. One, we do have one of our albums, Bastard Childhood, is Disney samples, but changed so that they sound communist, so or working class, pro working class, and then we added metal doom guitar to it, so that's definitely a way. And then some of our other songs that do have lyrics, a lot of our stuff is very post rock, ambient,
okay,
instrumental, but some of the songs do have lyrics. Like one of them is James 5, which is probably the most anti-capitalist verse in the New Testament. And we just read from that, like straight up, and like there's just like a beat behind it.
Okay.
And then secondarily, I would say that hauntology has definitely inspired us. That one of the artists that uses that is Burial. There's a group called Burial it's one of our albums, for instance, is like pop samples, but we take them and make them haunting, like make them scary sounding, and make them like almost remove the pretense.
Okay.
And so that they are like saying the same thing, but it's like the meaning has now changed because it's darker, so like, and we take that kind of, and I think we break convention a lot. We're trying to do something that's not like, we have like parts in our music that are catchy, or parts in our music that are super melodic, or parts in our music that are, hooky. But we kind of bury that inside of a bunch of ambience, noise, abrasive stuff, and then just like post rock. And in so doing, we're kind of like saying this is like what life is. It's not just the hook. It's not just the catchy parts. It's like a lot of tough stuff too. So we kind of want to use the music as like a catalyst for, and when we do live shows, we definitely read from communist literature and stuff like that. And so yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
How many albums does Sound Bandits have released?
We have 7 so far.
7. Okay. So when did that start?
About a year ago. So
really, that much production in a year?
Yes. So that's kind of our thing. Is what we do is we do field recordings of so the first few albums were field recordings of me and my friend Casey, who's also hosts a radio show with me. Basically I would just record him playing guitar in his bedroom, and then I would go back and Paul stretch it or add some samples in, or like do a bunch of weird stuff to make their atmospheric backing over the guitar. And then I might play little keyboards or ukulele or something like that to sharpen it up a little bit. And then and so that's kind of how we formed our stuff. So it was really easy to make really quick. Like what we did was we made albums of the stuff we made, and then we made a best of phase 1, which is really our, like, I guess those could be considered like the auxiliary, almost like once we put out the best of. And so like when we create the next thing, we're hoping to do several albums here in this next phase. And we have the newest one we did was less overdubbed, more live. And we have a drummer now, we have a bassist, we have a saxophonist now in this second phase, and a MIDI
And do you play instruments?
I do. I play the MIDI keyboard. I sing sometimes, and I've been playing guitar and uke and stuff like that since I was like 10 years old. But I'm not nearly as good as KC is at guitar. He's like really, really phenomenally good. I'm more about texture and soundscapes and stuff like that, personally. But yeah, so that's we just have an interesting recording process. It's a process art, you know.
And you say you and KC also have a radio show.
We do. 99.9.
Is that an AM, FM?
It's FM. It's
FM.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh wow! And what's it again? FM what?
It's 99.9. Whoop FM. You can listen to it online. Whoop FM, Cleveland, Tennessee. And it is, I will say, a reactionary station. It is owned by the pioneer of the paycheck loan advance.
Really?
Yes, and he eats with Donald Trump. He like goes out to eat with Donald Trump.
Okay.
Like Alan Jones.
Oh God. What's the chances of that happening?
Well, somebody was asking somebody else at the bar we play at if they wanted to host, and that person was saying, "Well, I work in the mornings," and so I was like, "I'd love to host," and they didn't know, you know, that I was an activist and all this different stuff, and so like, oh, okay, cool, and so then I sat down, held my tongue, was in a couple of their shows. And then they let me do a morning show, you know, and we've been playing, you know, leftist music. We've been saying leftist stuff, and they haven't kicked us off yet. Yeah.
Wow, good for you. Good. That's good to see. But that kind of goes into some stuff I've sort of dealt with this last 3 years. This has been a very tumultuous period in our history. Even just from a sensibility standpoint, not even a violent standpoint necessarily, but just with the emotional grasp that the sensationalized media and the fake news and everything has gotten, you know, just going from everything. It seems like everything is every 6 months, there's some catastrophic event that's happening. And regardless of how real it may seem, the reaction to the event is just so exponential and immense. And I've never seen anything like this. It seems like it's just getting worse and worse with once a news story gets out, it just becomes that much more magnified. And I don't know if that's going to stop. But I was wanting to go to the point of this censorship campaign that's going on right now. And even people on the right that I follow, not just my leftist outlets, a lot of those people are censored too, simply because they're anti-establishment and it's not matching up with the corporate narratives. It sounds like a lot of the stuff that we've been describing is completely mischaracterized by the time it reaches the power brokers with the information. And so I wanted to kind of get your view on how do we stay on message with presenting communism, socialism as positives. But when you talk to people who aren't as educated about these ideas, they seem to be very negative towards those ideas because of what they've heard from other people.
Oh, definitely, 100%. And I think that okay, so let's to kind of go.
I know there was a lot. I'm sorry.
No. I think I have. I know it's great. I think the first thing you said was about how the media has just, it blows things up so quickly. I think that's happened since probably the O.J. Simpson trial.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of realized how much money they could make by pushing out a narrative that it'll be controversial and that people will debate about. They don't want to say like man saves kitten from trees because nobody's going to argue with that. You know what I mean? Like, you know, say nobody's going to comment on that because there's nothing to argue about. Like, they want a story that they can get people to argue about, you know, and they want to phrase it in the way that will make it to where one side has to feel like they're has to kind of like backpedal or really express, you know, they want the comments, they want the views, they want and the way to do that is to, you know, share it in the most controversial way. And of course they want to divide the working class, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And so to go to your next point, how do we to a certain extent, how do we kind of combat the narrative that they're going to put out, you know what I mean, about us? And well, the very same thing that's created this situation with the social media is in a way also we sort of seized the means of it too. They would never have talked about Black Lives Matter the way they did if it wasn't for the fact that they had to because social media was, they may have just, and because they talked about Occupy a little bit, but it was, I think that part of it is, just continuing to be out on social media, because a lot of people get to it that way. They really do like start to change their minds when they start to see things. So I think that's part of it, although there's just as much on the other side, and probably more because they can pay for bots and stuff. So I think the other way is to kind of talk about these things from a perspective of a democratic republic, because that's what we're supposed to be, and maybe not using certain language, maybe saying, instead of capitalism, saying extra ownership of production, and if maybe we say it like that, just things like that can kind of that can kind of get past all the Pavlovian response laden landmines, that are just so much planted in people's minds. I think that but I don't think that's like, I think that also just sharing actual facts of the material circumstances in comparison with the material circumstances elsewhere. Just that alone has blown my mind over and over again, finding out things about countries that I thought were like despot that actually are running better than what we are. I think there's a lot of people. Speaking of censorship, Trump, Fox News wouldn't play Trump when he talked about foreign policy. You know what I mean?
I know.
And because his foreign policy, he was talking shit about Hillary Clinton and how she had murdered Gaddafi and what they've done in Libya.
Definitely, yeah.
And that's so true. And when Joe Biden said, you got children in cages, he said, well, who built those cages?
Exactly.
Joe? And that's not a bad point, And as much as I don't like the guy, that there were certain things that he got away with saying because he's a New York billionaire, and New York billionaires is who all the people listen to,
Exactly.
So I think there is this like space for people. I think that we can also look at examples of like, okay, in the peasants in Russia, Stalin had this thing called free capitalism, which is where they didn't have landlords, but they could basically buy and sell and trade their food with a market to the city, because he felt like that would benefit them. They would be able to buy better tractors, better, things like that, and that would benefit the entire country. So I think we can also kind of say like, things that just blow people's mind, like that engineers are paid more than everybody else in the Soviet economy, for instance. That because people think that everybody's paid the exact same. People, and then there's just all these myths that if we can do in tandem, demystifying when we need to, and then also rewording when we need to, just depending on the situation. Like if I'm doing a civics class here locally for some of the underserved community, I'm probably not going to use the word communism, socialism, anarchism, capitalism right away. I'm going to talk about it on a who does the work, who produces the work, like on a very, very like material basis. So because that's where ideology should be formed from, is from the material circumstances of the actual place that you're in. And I feel like through doing that, through pointing out the material realities of the situation, that you'll come to the same conclusions, because I feel like these conclusions are, they're pretty self-evident once looked at, deeply enough.
Do you think that the misconceptions of these ideologies and some in practice, do you think that some of that is from overexposure? The reason why I say that is because I think, for instance, you mentioned the working class. And I like to put my attention towards that, because I feel like a lot, like 80% of my friends are like liberals. I love them to death, but just straight up like shit lib type stuff, just all the time. It's like they have Black Lives Matters banners and LGBTQIA banners. It's like they're on point 90% about Black people and trans people and gay people, intersex people. But the shit that they do is like completely like right-wing bourgeois bullshit capitalism, like it always is. The suit and tie class. It's always like even these are the most well-intended people, professionals, they have all these careers and stuff. But the working class, specifically the people that I want to target and talk about, I feel like regardless of ideology, a lot of those people don't understand those terminologies. And so they will be more likely to join a revolution eventually. Like a lot of that's why I try to be careful and navigate, because I feel like a lot of people who are Trumpers, a lot of those people could be revolutionary if you explain it to them in a different way. Because honestly, a lot of the way they live, some of these people are very communal as it is. I'm saying to myself, your economic mindset is obviously already in gear with what we're already proposing. Is it just the wordage? Is that what throws them off? Is it just the way you say the word? Because if you put that shit on Fox News or whatever, they just lose their minds when you say socialism, communism. It's like someone's just like attacking their whole family.
It's funny because like Tucker Carlson will say some stuff that sounds straight up like Marxist sometimes, and then I'm just like, what did he just say? But then he'll follow it up with some like stuff that makes me realize that if he is of that bent, he's a Nazi-ball. He's a National Bolshevik. He's a Strasserist.
Gotcha.
And for those who maybe not familiar with those terms, there are groups of people who existed in history who were for working rights, who wanted workers' rights, but also wanted ethno states. And so those folks are, or traditionalist religious theocracy sort of feels, so the Russian Orthodox Church, oftentimes a lot of folks that they kind of have a national Bolshevik ideology wherein they want good things for workers, but they'll also be very anti-gay marriage, anti-trans, anti-feminism,
interesting.
So there is some, so it's like, we got to be careful, I guess, in some ways. We got to be able to, we want, these things for everyone. And there are a lot of different ideologies that are niche. And so I think that a lot of this stuff has to do with exposure to the people in the community. So like if you have, this is hard because my trans friends aren't going to want to hang out with my reactionary friends. You know what I mean? Because they don't feel safe around them, understandably so. And so, and having these conversations, but if we don't have these conversations with those reactionary people, then they're only going to have
those perceptions.
Yeah. And so that's a hard one. You know what I mean? As a non-binary person who presents masculine, you know what I mean? As and this comes down to identity, and it's hard. Identity politics are a hard one because okay, I'm Jewish, Cherokee, Irish, and Italian. There was a time and place when none of those things were considered white, but I am definitely white because I'm white presenting. You know what I mean? Like, and so there are folks just like, and so they're okay, just like with people who have class conscious but have maybe free time to not be coerced into labor. Lenin said they were professional revolutionaries. So I guess if we have the privilege of being able to go into those spaces without danger and the consciousness to understand these issues, it is our responsibility to go to those folks and try our best to not just insult them and to try and like really wrestle in the way of like Roddy Piper in that movie They Live, with these folks and just, especially if they're already our friends, to go, hey, no, like really check this out, like and to really to educate ourselves to the point where we can have these kind of conversations. That's a super important part of I think the responsibility of someone on the left who wants to change the thing is not just to, but it's not the responsibility necessarily of the most marginalized, because they could be putting themselves in danger in doing so. If they're not, then they would be, then that would be the best, because then you can make friends with somebody, and then that friendship, that communality will create, I think, the understanding much quicker.
Well, the reason why I made that comment, and I try to focus, because from my vantage point, you and I guess it's safe to say that we're clearly outside of this matrix, this right-wing matrix shit, which includes the liberals, Democrats, I feel like the country is so far to the right that people who are on the actual left can't even have ideas that become mainstream because they've completely shifted the narratives all the way. It's just getting more and more right. Like the person in office now, who, I mean, to me, he's a bigger problem than Trump was, but he is like those kind of people who can have the privilege of getting support from pretty conscious, progressive-minded people, but they get votes. They give votes to a person like Joe Biden. I'm saying to myself, that's way ideologically to the right of us that we could ever be. But I don't think people on the outside see, or within the inside, I don't think that they can see that variance politically. And even within the group of the quote unquote far left, there's a lot of variance between those people because I could only imagine the people that you've associated with over the years, they would have some serious disagreements with you about strategy and just ideology in general towards the electoral system based on our conversation. Would you agree with that assessment?
Oh yeah, 1000% on both accounts. I think that for the first thing with liberals, I think that showing them that Biden has open drilling more than Trump did, that Obama and he started more wars than Trump did, that he's deported more people than Trump did. That these kind of things will show them like, well, if you don't like these things, about Trump, which understandably so, then why do you like these things about this candidate? Now, at the very same time, we do have to figure out some sort of way of, because it is like when you go to the ballot box, one day out of 364 days, there's only two choices. You know what I mean? You can
I
vote
like
for
the way you put that. One out of 364 days. Which fucks me up too, because the work that you do, and it's like these motherfuckers go in one day and push a fucking button, a misinformed decision, and it's like, you better fucking vote. You better vote. And I'm saying to myself, fuck you. It's like, how you gonna be that fucking, like, I guess, privileged and like have that much animosity towards a person who's skeptical about the voting process or don't want to vote in this bullshit charade anyway?
That's Western individualism, I think, to a certain extent. I mean, that's just a thing of like, I did this thing, so I now identify with this thing. So now you must do this thing, or we can't codify our relationship.
Oh gosh, that makes me sick.
I think that we gotta meet the people's needs better than the current model.
100%.
And when we do that, then the people will go to the thing that helps them the most. I think that, but I also think that in the same sense that they think that's the best they can do. I mean, I think that's it's hard one, because it's some folks, just their interests aren't the same as other people's. You know what I mean? So they think that maybe their needs are being met by the current administration, and they don't really, in some way or another. And I don't know. It just depends on the person. It depends on what their class interests are.
100%. Yeah. But that's the thing, and that's why I told you off camera about, well, it's on camera now, that the academic sort of dilemma. I mean, I'm at a crossroads. Like, yes, I want to teach. A lot of my students are friends with me on social media, so they know that I kind of deal with political stuff and talk to people politically about stuff, and they know that it doesn't necessarily match up with what the academy wants or likes. And I just don't see those people in the academy, to me, which represents the same hierarchy that we're trying to, I guess, shift, dismantle, a combination of the two. I don't know exactly, what direction that's going in, but I feel like the education class is a part of that same system. And so we're speaking to individuals who are not in the same social class as some of the people that we really need to sort of rise up. And so why would those people have the interest of the working class when they feel like they've graduated from the seed?
And I mean, yes, 100%. I can give you a really a direct example from what happened in my situation. And and when I say this, and I'm sure that, you have friends amongst those folks, and I have friends amongst these folks too. So I'm not trying to say anything about anybody individually here. But there was a group that I was working with, I was doing security for, that was a liberal group. I just won't say any names too much, just to kind of not, throw anybody to the bus, because I think these are good people, you know what I mean? But essentially what was happening was, there was a Confederate monument, and we were standing across the street from it, and we would hold signs, we'd have moments of silence, we'd take knees, we would speak, we'd do speaks, we have songs playing and stuff like that. But we pretty much ignored the people over there in the middle. Well, I mean, not in the middle, but obviously to the far right. But in this particular situation, in the middle of the street, where the Confederate monument is, it's in the middle of a median, and they were all standing at that. And for about 3 months, we stood out there, and I did security, and I was listening to the leadership and just kind of doing security. But as soon as the leadership said they weren't going to be doing anymore, I got like 15 or 16 Marxist, anarchist radicals from the nearby area to come down. And we told them we were going to be there at 6. We showed up at 3. We took the statue. We stayed there. And we just stayed at the statue. And when they came up, we talked to them about working class politics, the invention of whiteness, like all.
Who are you talking to again?
The Confederate supporters.
Okay.
And so we actually sat there and we talked to them. This made front page paper in the local news, and it was
positive,
anarchist Marxist news. Like we got to, they published exactly what we when they interviewed us. We had a guy in the paper who's just a really good guy, and he was willing to like talk to us. And I didn't say my name because I didn't want it to be about me or anything, but I made it. We talked about the Black Panther Party. We talked about like all these different powerful movements that exist in the South, and the Appalachia should not be just known as a 5-year traitor racist war. You know what I mean? Because there's so much powerful leftist movements that existed, from like, Nat Turner, John Brown, Harriet Tubman, to MLK, to the Black Blair Mountain, to the moonshine, even like all this different stuff, like that was like, that shows that we have a history of more than just racism, that we're not just a place. I think that's what the liberals have done a lot, is to kind of make it to where the South, they've abandoned the South. They've abandoned us. And so we have to develop some sort of organized worker situation here, whether that be a party or whatever, that actually will educate. Popular education, is a super first thing, I think we got to do. And I think looking at the past models of what worked in situations that we're somewhat close to, and seeing what they did from where we are, is a good way of kind of, and then rewriting that in our own words, and then giving that to people in the quickest kind of doses possible, to kind of, if you just plant the seed a little bit, the mind, the next time they see that situation happen, they'll look at it under different auspices, even if they don't immediately agree. But and I think that it's a slow process, and that's kind of where, with the anarchism, and I will say this is a similarity to the Democrats, stuff like that. It's like, if the thing doesn't, so I'll say it like this: voting is immediately available, and it's something you can do, and it's something that has at least some small modicum of influence in some way or another, although very, very little, and less and less, as we can see with the Roe versus Wade decision, that the Democrats didn't seem to do anything about. And so in that same situation, I feel like a lot of my anarchist comrades and my friends, they see anything that is done, and they don't say, oh, we did a good job on getting that thing done. They say, oh, that thing wasn't enough. And it wasn't, you know what I'm saying? And of course it wasn't. But in that same vein, they can't suggest by their very ideology that we would seize power in a way that has worked historically. Like, they can't say that, because in that very moment, they're saying, in their view, we have to take authority here. We have to, you know what I mean? And so I think that stifles or slows down the process that could happen because we don't want to be seen as the bad guys taking authority, and understandably so, because of the propaganda that's been spread so much, so that, you know, and then also there's so much anti-government propaganda, which is important. And when I say government, I mean as an entity, not as the U.S. government. There's so much like that government is seen as such a bad word, and for years I was that same thing. But government's just a gun. You know what I mean? It depends on who wields it.
Exactly. I love the way you put that. Government is a gun, and it depends who's operating it. It has nothing to do with the gun itself. And that's so sort of going into that metaphor. And then I'll segue a little bit into the 2018 article again before we conclude, because unfortunately, in about 45 minutes, I got to interview Spike Cohen. And awesome. And so I wanted to make sure I had enough time to set up for him, but we got about 20 strong minutes left ahead of us, which is fine. What's this deal about this obsession with guns from the liberal and conservative class, this group of people who it seems like they condemn people who even have guns. Like, I used to be one of these type of people, like, I never owned a gun, I've never shot a gun. But it's one of those things where I had a negative view towards people who even had guns. How do we change those perceptions as far as how a gun is not necessarily a negative thing when it comes to these sort of matters that we're talking about?
So that's a really good question. I think we got, okay. So if I'm talking to, I'm very much for background checks and more steps in between. It should be just as hard to get a gun as it is to get a driver's license. Like, it should be at least as hard to get a gun as it is to get an abortion. You know what I'm saying? Like, these things that should be like, there should be some steps. There should be some, like, you know what I mean? Like, there, you know, but that being said, I do think that, okay, this is my other thing. Culturally, it depends, like, the culture surrounding a gun. You know what I mean? The culture surrounding guns, the culture surrounding everything. So to my liberal friends, I will say who are for, like, gun abolition, like total gun.
Oh, wow. Really?
Well, for people who want,
okay.
I'm not saying there are folks, but for people who are for total gun prohibition.
Okay.
For people who are that, I would say, who do you think that they're going to take the guns from first? Who do the police always policed? Who, you know, and so once you answer that question, do you really want to disarm people who are already at the end of the gun of the government, you know, of the police? To my conservative friends who don't want any sort of checks whatsoever, when's the last time we in the United States, you know, of where a well-organized group of people used guns for a positive anti-tyrannical purpose? So, like, they're shooting kids. You know what I mean? Like, that's what's happening. And so I think that this is an issue. And now, that being said, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, to a certain extent, we can see that a larger military force was unable to stop a smaller, less armed force, because for a lot of reasons, you know. So if the thing in your head is we don't need guns because they have tanks, well, you know, it's not like historically that hasn't, you know, has necessarily been an end game for conflicts. Now, if you think that we need to do it peacefully, and you think that that's and we should never have any sort of violence to combat this situation, then, you know, I feel you in my heart. Like, I feel you, you know, that would be wonderful, and that would be what everyone would want. That has historically never worked. And the violence is already always going on, you know,
100%.
Yeah. And so it's not like we would be starting the violence. We would be attempting to stop it.
But see, that's the thing that bothers me is it always tends to come up with when the mass shooting involving kids. But when it's three streets down from my block, it's okay. You know, when our friends are killed or whatnot, you know, or some relative is killed or something, there's hardly any sort of like emotional backing behind it. It's just typically, you know, in Nashville, this happened, another shooting. It always this big city phenomenon, and they just go on and on and on about where it's just normal. They normalize it like, oh, yep, another black neighborhood, more crime on the weekend. But it doesn't seem to be that much outcry, or at least the context of guns doesn't seem to apply to that situation, but it does to the mass media sensationalized situation.
Oh, well, yeah, and I think that has two major pools. One, that the American media doesn't care about black people, and that two, sadly, you know, and that two, I think that it has to do with that schools legislation for doing something in schools versus legislation for doing something in neighborhoods is just much more tricky, even if you're not even talking about an ideological perspective. It's a much more difficult situation. And I think that because you know, I mean, of course, it's like, you know, the when I very first went to Ameren to talk to those folks to try and like I went into the conference center and I bought white Powerade and crackers. I wanted to blend in. And I said, how come y'all laud Irish and Italian gangs in movies like the Gangs of New York and Godfather, but y'all are so against black gangs, like what you're always talking about it.
Right.
Like any group that's outside the mainstream economy is going to form entities to secure economic interests. That is going to happen. And this one guy looked at me and goes, we got rid of the Irish problem. And I was like, and a bunch of his friends looked at him like, what'd you just say? And I was like, yes.
That's hilarious.
So like, I think that, I think that this is, it's easier to say, okay, they already have some legislation probably in place, in bills, in forms of these kinds of things to deal with closed off areas where children are, right? They want to make the schools more like prisons because they already got the school to prison pipeline. These are the same people who build these things oftentimes and stuff like that. So they already have ideas for that. I don't think they have ideas for what to do because they benefit off of the situation in a certain way. They benefit off of saying that you know, of any time somebody talks about Black Lives Matter, they get to go Chicago or whatever the fuck, you know. They benefit off of this situation. They don't really care to change it.
Of course not.
Yeah. And so I think that's probably part of that reason. And again, it's just from any ideological perspective, it is a tough situation to say, like, you know, and the real answer is we have to end poverty. We have to end desperation. We have to end these situations. But of course, that's never going to, it's like they're never going to say neoliberalism on MSNBC or Fox News, because once they say that, the kayfabe is broken. You know what I mean?
Oh, you get that shit. Do you get that wrestling terminology in there? No, it's a fucking show, and I wish people could see that show for what it is. I mean, just like the way organized sports are. I mean, this shit is very WWE like, especially with whenever money is involved. I mean, the gambling is bigger than ever now with the fan duels and the DraftKings and everybody else. And so, I mean, that shit's rigged, you know, just like professional wrestling, and the political game is rigged just like professional wrestling.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of speak on that a little bit, like it was very interesting to me, and I don't know, I don't want to. This is me going conspiratorial here.
No, you keep going.
Right after Katrina, the New Orleans Saints go to the Super Bowl. Then Eli Manning versus Peyton Manning,
both from New Orleans.
Yeah, and so
what's the chances of that?
Well, and the fact that two brothers make it, and it's like these are things are just like, oh wow. Like, even as somebody who's not interested in football, I'm like, oh, I want to see these guys who came out of like a really shitty situation win. Oh, I want to see these two brothers go at it. You know, it does feel like there's, now that being said, you know, you can build storylines out of, you know, I mean, like real life does have these kind of peaks and valleys and stuff like that. I mean, obviously, and it's interesting, you know. So I can't say that 100% these things were set up that way, but when you talk about like Moneyball, that movie with, you know, or whatever, like you got the funding and stuff like that, and it's like, and you're, you know, then it's not too far. But why the Yankees win a million games in a row here, a million seasons in a row? Why were they always there for so long? It's because they were the most well-funded team, you know. So it all ties together for sure.
Have you read this article since it was published? This 2018 article that they wrote about you, the outline?
I have.
And first of all, the title, like the very first part of it, like I don't have it pulled up here, but they refer to you with the wrong pronoun, first of all. Like that was like the first thing. So I was like, what the fuck is like, you have they in all the article and then you fucking use he in the very beginning. And I mean, and like I said, I'm not saying that person's not a good writer, but it's just the tone of it was really interesting. They almost threw you in the same mold as AOC and Rashida Tlaib. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, so they're already, so the mainstream media, I don't know if this is mainstream or not, but a lot of print media that's loyal to mainstream media sensibilities, they like to already present people like AOC and Rashida Tlaib as far left anyway, which is complete bullshit.
Yeah.
But they present them as far left. And so when it's Jae Carico, he's far left, or they far left. They make you seem like you're just absolutely just out of this world left. Yeah. Is that kind of how you read the tone of this article about you?
It did seem like this was a I'm trying to think of the word oddity piece. If that makes sense, like that it's like a sideshow. It's like I definitely feel like, you know, that guy was cool. He like was with us in the demonstration that we went to a year after Charlottesville, where we went to DC. And this is an interesting thing. We had 3,000 Black Bloc Antifa out that day in Washington, DC, and no media coverage about that.
Of course not.
We didn't shit on the walls of the Capitol. You know, as a matter of fact, the cops revved their engines at us before deploying tear gas. We had to run through a construction site, through a restaurant. And to be fair to this guy, he did that with us. So like,
okay,
that's cool. You know, so now that being said, yes, I do think that this was kind of an oddity piece. This is kind of like a, you know, it's the Vice News sort of like, here's this really interesting thing, but we are saying it's like very odd. You know what I mean?
And illegitimate. Like a lot of the words they use the Anti-Defamation League commentators saying that, how can you take this anarchist seriously?
Yeah.
How can you take this campaign seriously? So they're already kind of throwing you, like limiting your scope as it is within their eyes.
And I would say the same thing happened, honestly, on a very anarchist podcast that I was mentioned on.
Oh, wow.
Thing. Yeah, so
What's it called?
Crime Think podcast, the Ex-Worker. They haven't done it in about a year. And I love their podcast. Let me say that too. I love Crime Think. I think they're freaking awesome. But they did say something that was kind of like threw me off a little bit. They said, if this person is trying to seek political power, then that's not good, basically, because they're anarchist. But if they're trying to start a campaign that moves the thoughts out and builds towards organizational stuff, then that's good. And it was just weird because I'd been in contact with them and they didn't ask me if I was trying to do the former or the latter. And I was clearly trying to do the latter. And it felt weird that they kind of, you know, left it up in the air as to which one I was trying to do. And now as a Marxist, a Leninist, I'm actually, you know, Lenin talks about being, you know, joining. Yeah, you should join reactionary trade unions. If there's a trade union that's not that's not really leftist, you should still join and try and make it that. If you're part of a bourgeois, there's a bourgeois party. Yeah, like try and put yourself in there. It's like if you own property, rent control, and don't make people pay exorbitant amount. If they have to pay $1,300 and you can afford for them to pay $600. then only make them pay that and give them a rebate if you can. Once all the stuff for like, if anything goes wrong is taken care of, because if somebody else gets a hold of that, they're going to up the rent. You know what I mean? And so if you can put yourself in a position of power and hold to your ethics, well, then by all means, Thomas Sankara talks about this. If you're a millionaire, you can still be a socialist as long as you use your money for socialist purposes, as long as you got your money like through like whatever, you might have a rock star or a celebrity or a musician or something like that who just happened to make a bunch of money, or an engineer or something like that who just happened to, but as long as you use your stuff for socialist purposes, well, then you can still be a socialist if you're trying to help the working class. It's not about how much money you have, it's about what you do with it and how you got it.
But do you see that? But what you just said then is interesting, because you see the correlation between, and I have a serious problem with celeb culture.
Oh yeah.
Celeb culture, because those people you're describing, and they love to use these demographics. That's what I hate about neoliberalism as a whole, is this virtue signaling, symbolism bullshit, where they would use people who did grow up in the projects, but they become super capitalist, and then everything is just about capitalistic endeavors. They're these big ass music people. They don't have anything to do with the working class anymore. Are you kidding me? But just because they're black or trans or LGBTQ or anything that's symbolic, they automatically want to link them to the working class, but they're not part of that class anymore, because they're not demonstrating anything. They're not demonstrating any organizational presence to help those people. They're only helping the elite at that
1000%. And I think there are exceptions, but what you're saying is very true. I think Killer Mike might be an exception. I think that
he's taking a lot of shit lately.
yeah. I think that his heart's in the right place, though. I think that another exception, like Robin Williams, who actually funded anti-fascist movements and stuff like that.
Robin Williams?
Money. Yeah, Robin Williams. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I did not know that.
Yeah. So
wow.
like there are exceptions, and I think so. To speak to celebrity culture, and like I don't want to get too Lacanian or anything, but this is the people without the desire, the people without the anxiety, the people who have everything, and they don't, but they have to put on the show that they do. And so do we on Instagram or whatever, if you want to be a not a thought leader per se, but like a social influencer or whatever. And so like I agree. So here's where Lenin is. I think this reminds me a little bit of Lenin. Lenin said there are people who have class consciousness, who don't have who aren't coerced into labor. They're not necessarily proletariat, but they use their time and that privilege to try and build towards revolution, And so, the proof is in the pudding, the praxis is where it's at, that's, I think that's where it is, it's like, and so, so let's say in China, there's billionaires, right? But those folks have to know that if they stockhold food from people, they will get executed. Like 13 billionaires were executed, 17 were murdered, and 16 killed themselves last year because of the baby formula situation. They were stockholding baby formula. Oh my gosh. And so, like, what did our country do whenever the Bhopal incident happened? Find them a day's worth of profits. What did we do? We give them a slap on the wrist. That just being that's kind of neither here nor there to a certain extent. But in some countries, the workers have cheerleaders, or the workers have like places where they can, if they're one of the best workers, they'll be out doing cool tricks with like throwing sandbags up a level while they're building the house or whatever. These really cool things, and they're kind of celebritized in a certain way. Meanwhile, the celebrities might go to each individual school on a regular basis and teach kids, after school care programs and stuff. And so they're in as much as these things exist, the way that they're used in the United States is of course, meant to, maintain and sustain the situation, even if they're in the Hunger Games movie, or they're in like, a movie about the Black Panthers, like Judas and the Black Messiah, or, even if they're in these things, it's really about what they do outside of that, not just because sometimes the movie can be a steam release valve. The art can be this, well, now that we've seen it, now that it's been said, we don't actually have to do it,
I'm curious to see how both of our followings will react to this video, this important conversation that we're having, that I wish continued, but unfortunately due to time constraints, we'll have to go relatively soon. But I did want the audience to get like your social media presence, if you have any, so they could contact you if they wanted to. And I also wanted to say, I really enjoyed this conversation so much to the point where if there is a second season of Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum, I would definitely want you back on to talk some stuff with me, because I felt like there's a lot that I didn't get to talk to you about, but I wanted to. But I think we got a good balance, personal and sort of, private matters along the state matter and non-state matters to kind of get the audience some sort of information about our conversation. Is there any way people can contact you directly, social media?
For sure. I'm Jae Carico on Facebook. That's probably the best way to reach me. It may go a message request, but I'll check it every once in a while because I've reached the Fleming's limit at the moment. But if you want to reach me, you can also reach me on email, jmcarico@gmail.com. I also really enjoyed this conversation. I thought it was awesome. Thank you so much for having me on. It was an honor.
That makes me feel good. Yeah. And it's all about education. And I feel like this is a contribution outside of academia, sort of the brick wall, only taught to the elite, the experts sort of mentality. I want to talk to everyday people and experts. I don't want to box myself into just talking to those kind of people, especially about issues that affect the poor people and the working people, everyone else.
I saw your episode with Constance, and I thought that was excellent. Really.
Oh, wow. You've been following me.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. And I wanted to say one more thing. I thought of a caveat that just real quick. Anything that a professional revolutionary or any of these folks do, because their life is different than the life of the people that they're trying to help in a certain way, at least materially, we have to do mass line, like the importance of demographic surveys and going to the people, listening and finding out what they need, and then putting that out to the rest of the people. That is of extreme importance. I think I would feel remiss if I hadn't said something about that.
Well, Jay, I totally appreciate you. We will definitely keep in touch. I've been following you ever since on social media. There was some exchanges we had on that I definitely want to talk about, but we can, like I said, the next time we're going to keep in touch and keep doing the great work that you do. And much love to you and your family as well.
Thank you so much. Solidarity.
Thank you. Nos vemos.
Have a great one.